Hello and welcome to Nuclear for Australia's live stream this evening. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good day to wherever you join us from around the world. Today, I know it's Nuclear for Australia, but we're very fortunate to have a global audience. Now, we're just having a few difficulties once again connecting to Instagram. It seems like every time we try and do this, we do have issues, but we will get that up in a second. I'm not sure what's happened to Taya's screen, but in the meantime, I'll just go through some housekeeping with everyone today. So our agenda, with this time we've got an agenda for today, looks like this. So from 6 to 6:05, if we're still on time, we'll be doing a bit of an introduction. That'll be followed by 40 minutes of questioning with Taya, where you'll be able to submit your questions across our various social media platforms. So I'd encourage you, please do that. That will then be followed. We'll then say goodbye to Taya then. And then you can ask me questions about my upcoming Senate appearance if you're interested in that. And then we'll have a 5-minute conclusion at the end. But thank you very much for joining us from wherever you join us here today. So I think before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone, if you haven't already, to please sign our petition at change.org/nuclear for Australia. We're already, I think, at 2,414 signatures and counting. So if you can sign that, please consider doing so. So I'll now introduce Taya. So Taya is a member of the Finnish Greens, the Green League there in Finland. You may recall she recently visited Brisbane, where I'm coming from today, to relaunch RePlanet Australia. And she's an international coordinator of RePlanet. So we're very lucky to have her joining us today. If you could possibly quickly introduce yourself, Taya. I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name because I don't think I'll do it justice. So if you could introduce yourself, that would be greatly appreciated. Apologies, Taya. I don't think your microphone's working for whatever reason. So we'll get that unless it's on my end. Just test that. If you could, if anyone's watching, please let us know if it's working on your end in terms of Taya's microphone. We'll just quickly get that sorted. This mic muted by host.
Does it work now?
Yes, it does. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll get you to introduce yourself. Sorry about that.
No problem. So my name is Törmänen. I'm from Joensuu, Finland, and Joensuu is in North Karelia, Finland, the eastern part of Finland. I'm a biologist. I have a master's degree in animal behavior, and as Will already said, I'm an international coordinator of RePlanet. I was one of the people starting the whole movement, so I was chairing the local organization here for 4 years. And we had other like-minded people in different European countries. So approximately like 3 years ago, we started having meetings, and RePlanet was launched as a global movement last year in February. And now we already have organizations in Africa, Uganda, Kenya, and I was just launching the Australia organization a few weeks ago. So yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. So I might start with a first initial question and a reminder to everyone to please send in your questions throughout this evening. Why do you support nuclear energy?
It has the smallest environmental footprint, so it's very simple to me. It's always been very simple to me. So I've been a pro-nuclear activist since I was a teenager, basically. So to me, it just made sense. It's 24/7 reliable, low carbon energy. It has a very small environmental footprint. And because I've been an environmentalist since I was a very small child as well, then to me, it was obvious, like we need nuclear. And especially when I started studying biology at the university, I also took environmental sciences, and we had a course on energy production. And that made it even more clear to me that we definitely need nuclear, because it's the only well, for example, in Finland, we have a lot of hydro, but that's very devastating for river ecosystems. So right now in Finland, we're trying to actually get rid of some of our hydro plants, the smallest ones. And all that wouldn't be possible if we hadn't we wouldn't have a nuclear power. So for me, it was just the environmental reasons.
Can you describe the use of nuclear energy in Finland? So obviously in Australia it's a bit different. We've got a ban, but what's like the energy mix in Finland, and how does nuclear play a role in that?
Well, right now when Olkiluoto 3 has started, there are days when we have over 50% of our electricity produced by nuclear. So it's a very big chunk of our clean electricity. We have hydro, but not as much as in Norway, for example. We don't have mountains, even though one German guy was trying to tell me that we have mountains in Finland, but I was like, I live here, I'm pretty sure that we don't. And then we burn biomass for district heating, and this is a problem. So that's why we're thinking about building smaller nuclear plants that produce only heat for district heating, because we don't really have a solution for that right now. Then we have a lot of wind power, which is increasing quite a bit. But there's problems where I live in eastern Finland because it messes up the military radars. And because we're neighbors to Russia, that's obviously a problem. So in my area in eastern Finland, we haven't been able to build any wind power, basically. And then solar is very difficult in Finland. It's increasing as well, but obviously we have several months in winter when we don't really have any sunlight, so that doesn't work during winter. So wind power is more prominent in Finland. And then we still use some peat, but that's fading out. And we're also closing the last coal plants here in Finland, so we're getting rid of coal completely. And that's also possible because we have nuclear.
Can you describe your position in the Finnish Parliament and why the Finnish Green League decided to support nuclear energy, and when they did come out and endorse it?
So we had very recently, we had parliament elections just a few weeks ago. The Greens didn't do well this time, so I think we lost like 7 seats. But we did have a good, we were in the government during the previous parliamentary season, like for 4 years. So we had several ministers, and our climate and environmental minister was a Green. So it has been a big party in recent years in Finland, not one of among the top 3, but in the middle. The Greens decided, well, this whole process started in, I think, like around 2015, and even a little bit earlier, when a few prominent members of the Greens, like one of the ex-leaders, for example, came out and said that he's reconsidered his position and he's now supportive of nuclear. Then a section called Greens for Science and Technology was started within the Greens, and they wanted to make our policies more science-based. And nuclear discussion was part of this, because we believe that, well, the science says that nuclear is low carbon, is environmentally friendly, so this needs to be changed within the Greens. And at the same time, my organization, the Finnish Ecomodernists, started 2015, and that organization was kind of giving pressure to all parties and the whole environmental movement to change their mind, because it was the only environmental organization in Finland that was very pro-nuclear. And we were very successful, because we were able to change the opinions, not only the Greens' opinions, but also the left. So the lefts are supportive of nuclear in Finland as well. None of the environmental movements are campaigning against nuclear. Fridays for Future is pro-nuclear. Greenpeace has even said that they're not trying to shut the nuclear plants down. They actually support SMRs. So we don't really have any opposition in Finland for nuclear. And the latest polls by the energy industry just came out a few days ago, and there's only 1% of Finns. Last year it was 3%, so we have gone down from that. 1% of Finns are completely against nuclear. That's just 1%. And 6% in total are a little bit against or a little bit against. But that's gone down even from last year. And the support is also still going up. So it's pretty amazing what we've done in Finland.
Can you describe why you were in Brisbane recently in Australia? What your visit was all about? What was the purpose of it?
Well, in Finland, they always keep telling climate activists that, because Finland is doing so well, you need to go to other countries. who are polluting more and tell them that they need to improve their habits. So that was why I was visiting. I was doing exactly that. So I want to go to different countries and explain how we're doing it in Finland and what are the benefits of having this very wide range of options and not excluding any options, and having an environmental movement and the Greens supporting nuclear and what we can achieve with that. So I just want to tell the story of Finland in different countries, because I think a lot of countries could learn from that. And also because I'm the international coordinator at RePlanet. So one of my duties is to help new organizations in different countries to launch their activities. And I wanted to support our RePlanet Australia in the launch of their organization.
What does RePlanet do, for anyone unfamiliar with the organization?
So we're a pro-human, pro-technology, pro-science environmental movement. So the focus is at RePlanet is to spare land. So we want to minimize the impact of humans to nature, but also we want humans to thrive. So we want everyone around the world to have a good standard of living. So we're aiming to have a good standard for living for everyone, but at the same time minimize our environmental footprint, so we can have both humans and nature thrive together.
And what's RePlanet Australia specifically doing? What's their main purpose through their advocacy?
I think the main focus will be like the energy policy, but also agriculture. A lot of the emissions in Australia come from agriculture. And we have this campaign called Reboot Food, where we explain like how we can substitute some of the animal products that we used by new technologies like precision fermentation, so we can shrink the land footprint of agriculture and food production, which is huge at the moment. So the biggest threat for biodiversity is land use, and agriculture is the main driver of like deforestation and other problematic things going on for biodiversity. So I think both energy and agriculture will be some of the main themes for RePlanet Australia.
And I can see, I'll show this on the screen, Tyrone's just shared a link to RePlanet Australia's website. So if you want to learn more about RePlanet Australia, you can look up replanet.au, so quite a simple domain there. Why do you think that Australia has a ban on nuclear energy? Can you see any justification for it?
No. I have to say I don't know all the history behind it and why it happened. I assumed it was a deal because there was a scientific reactor and they want to continue the use of that, and then they made a deal that there will be no like energy production nuclear plants. I think that's part of it, but I don't know all of it, like what's happened in Australia, but there's really no justification to ban one technology. I can't see any good arguments for doing that, because I mean, if you ban something, then that's banned for good. So even if there's developments, new technologies, you have kind of taking yourself out of the game. So I really don't see a point of banning some technologies, especially something like nuclear that clearly is more beneficial than harmful. So it's just about politics and has nothing to do with science. Will, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. A question from Andrea. Do you have any suggestions for us in Australia about how we might best direct our efforts to legalise nuclear energy, especially based on the Finnish experience? How do we change hearts and minds?
I think it's really important to make it a non-partisan issue. So you have to convince people from all, from every side of the political spectrum. That really worked in Finland. So we found the arguments for each party that they can relate to. So for Social Democrats, it's the jobs, like we have steel industry in Finland. We need to decarbonize that. So we need reliable energy 24/7 for these steel factories. And for the Greens, it's the environmental reasons and the urgency of the climate crisis. And you must give people room and possibilities to change their mind. And if they change their mind, like they're starting to say something positive about nuclear, they need support. They don't need people coming to say like, well, you just said last year that you hate nuclear, you're crap, I hate you because you have opposed nuclear for 20 years. So we need to be forgiving and let people to change their minds and be supportive of that. And also, I think it's really important to talk about the benefits of nuclear and not be engaged in the fight with the opposition. And you need to decide what the discussion points will be. So don't let the other side dictate what you're talking about, because they will be talking about the same things, and we've seen these arguments so many times. So you just have to kind of keep repeating your message and the benefits of nuclear, and people will understand.
Well, hopefully they do. Hopefully they do in Australia come to understand. First of all, did you talk to anyone from the Labor Party or from the Australian Greens whilst you were in Australia? Because I understand that Ted O'Brien, the Shadow Minister for Climate Change and Energy, reached out to you. Did you hear from them, or did they reach out?
Yeah, I didn't talk to anyone from the Labour Party. I did talk to some of the Greens, and they were very fruitful discussions. Unfortunately, the discussion culture in Australia right now is such that the Green politicians don't want anyone to know that they're talking about nuclear in a positive manner. So it's
Really?
yeah, because it might be like a political suicide at this point in Australia to be a Green politician and to be seen with someone who's pro-nuclear.
Yeah.
So some of these discussions have to happen kind of in a trustful environment behind closed doors, and that's how it will start. It will be like that in the beginning until someone has the courage to come out and say that I've changed my mind. But in this case, you have to be patient, and you have to be a person they can trust, so you can talk to them behind the closed doors, but then when they're ready, they can come out. But yeah.
Wow.
This is what I did, actually.
That's very interesting, because I'm about to talk to my local Greens MP. How many? I know you don't want to elaborate on it, because it's good that you're at least having conversations with them, and I understand that they have to remain private. But just by interest, like, how many Greens MPs did you speak to whilst here? Were they, I guess, a bit the younger Greens? If that's fair, like, what could you elaborate on possibly about the nature of your interactions with them?
Well, unfortunately, one of the meetings got cancelled because the person was ill. So I only got to meet with one person and their personnel. He was like it's a local politician more than an MP. But yeah, not, I wouldn't say old, but not young either. But I think if you want to learn from the experience that we had in Finland, we first talked to the young people and the young climate activists. And once they had kind of come out being pro-nuclear, like within the Greens in Finland, there was the Greens for Science and Technology first that said that we need nuclear. But then afterwards, the Green Youth changed their mind, and they became the second driving force within the Greens to change this policy. So now the Green Youth is just as much pro-nuclear as the Science Greens within the party. And with the environmental movement, the Fridays Future movement here in Finland, they were first, they didn't say really anything about nuclear, but then we kept talking to them, and then they started coming out saying pro-nuclear statements, and this then gives pressure to the older environmental NGOs, because like, oh, well, now the young people are pro-nuclear. If we keep campaigning against nuclear, then we lose these future generations. So that was what happened in Finland. So I will encourage that you would do that in Australia. Just reach out to young people, because they're more likely to change their mind. It's very difficult to come out and say that you're now pro-nuclear if you build your whole political career being against it. It's very difficult. You will most likely lose some voters. And that's why in Finland, the first people to come out and say that I've changed my mind were politicians that had ended their career. So they had
Right.
nothing to lose, but they were still prominent members of the party. And this is how it will likely happen in other countries as well. So older politicians who don't have anything to lose anymore because they're kind of leaving the game. And then younger politicians who have not built their career on opposing nuclear.
Mm. Oh, that's very interesting. And thank you for sharing all that with us. I'd like to ask specifically now about what you were doing here with RePlanet Australia. I've actually got a few of my peers who were at that Extinction Rebellion protest, but can you tell us what were you doing as RePlanet Australia there? What were you campaigning for? And through your interactions with some of those School Strike for Climate protesters, were any of them receptive to the idea of nuclear energy?
This is what we try to do in every country that we operate in. So we want to, because we have a lot in common with other environmental NGOs. We are worried about the same things. We are against fossil fuels. So every time there's a chance to kind of join in with their cause, like something that we all can agree on, then we do, because that's a way of building bridges. Like that's how we started in Finland. We just started going and showing up in climate marches because we care about the climate just as much they do. We just disagree on the methods. And at first in Finland, we got some resistance because we had nuclear signs. But the second time around, nobody cared anymore. And we were just, part of the whole group. So that's what you need to do. And you need to show the other organizations that you care and you're genuine about your environmental concerns, as we truly are. So that's why we wanted to join, because we agreed on the message of this specific demonstration. So there's no sense in because we want to be part of the environmental movement and not just trying to pick a fight with them, because we don't believe that's very useful. We did have some very good discussions. I don't think we specifically mentioned nuclear, because that's sometimes the best. We was discussing the problem at hand, and we didn't have any nuclear signs on this demonstration. So we didn't have specifically nuclear discussions, but just discussions about fossil fuels in Australia.
Yeah. What about I'll bring up another image. Did you get any comments about holding up this placard when you were at King George Square with Chris Bowen's comments? Did anyone come up to you? Did anyone take a flyer from you?
Yeah, we actually got many people took flyers. So we thought that was a very useful morning, because we did get a lot of people taking the flyers. I was only holding that sign, maybe just for that photo.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the other people that were holding it more got any comments. If any one of them is here, you can post that in the chat. But yeah, no, I didn't get any comments holding that sign, but I did distribute a lot of leaflets.
Yeah. Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have questions, it's not just me able to ask Taya questions. This is one of probably the only opportunities you'll get to ask her questions in a forum like this. We've just got a question from Jeremy. What approaches would you suggest to open up a discussion in Australia where there is no degree of comfort with existing nuclear power plants? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think he means Finland, though, not Norway. So I mean, there are many examples of countries that didn't have a nuclear plant before, but they're now looking into building some. I would always use the example of the Arab Emirates and Baraka, because they're really successful with not having any nuclear plants at all, and then building several in a good pace and low costs and on time. So that can happen. We have a neighboring country, Estonia, who's looking into SMRs. They don't really have nuclear plants, but they're looking into small reactors because they have a really dirty energy production system at the moment. And it seems to be going well so far. So there are examples of countries like that. I would use these examples to say that it's possible. And you have to start from somewhere. And I mean, in Finland, we didn't have any before we had any, and we were successful at building several. We were building 2 different reactor types, but they were still on schedule and on time. But the secret is to build something that already exists. With Olkiluoto 3, it was a huge problem that we were building something that was a first of a kind. So if you don't have any nuclear plants in your country, don't start with a first of a kind project. Build something that's already out there, has been built several times. That will kind of give people confidence, I think, with a good supplier who's building things, has been building things for all this time, and building a reactor type that exists somewhere already.
Yeah.
Then I think it's the best countries that don't have a reactor yet.
Yeah, we're getting a few comments and questions now. Now, briefly share some of them from Andrea. I've been handing out flyers on election day around Greens volunteers who were younger and are pretty open to the idea of nuclear. Maybe not enthusiastic, but nuclear curious. And I assume by that, I guess they're open to nuclear energy being legalised, at least having that option. Another comment from Jim. Since 2015, I've been sharing the safety evidence published in 2015 by the South Australian Fuel Commission into the nuclear fuel cycle with the Australian media. That has been nuclear fear-mongering since Chernobyl. Fortunately, you had the opportunity, Taya, to appear in the media to, I guess, turn the tide a bit on that. Then from Tyrone, some would argue that nuclear works for Finland, but Australia doesn't need it because we have so much land and wind and solar resources. Look, what would you, I'll frame this now as a question, Taya. For a country like Australia, where we do have so much access to the sun, to the wind, we've got vast amounts of land, possibly unlike Finland, is there still a need for nuclear energy, given that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, Arab Emirates has plenty of sun. They still decide to build nuclear because the sun goes down every night. So you always need some kind of storage, backup, transmission lines. There might be unexpected delays in being able to build all this in time. So I think that's why you need to diversify. You need to have all the options on the table. I was just looking briefly into RePlanet Australia has a really good post in LinkedIn if you want to check out about this new net zero Australia modeling and what it actually requires if you don't have nuclear in the picture. And the assumptions are, I mean, if you look at the assumption, it's really wishful thinking that you can make all this work in time, and still has a lot of fossil fuels in 2050. So that's why I would build nuclear, because it just reduces the risk of failure. We don't have this kind of storage existing yet anywhere else, and they always said that nuclear takes time, but so will building all these transmission lines and storage. It will take time, so the best time to start is now. We should have started decades ago, but yeah, the next best is now.
Yeah, I would almost frame it like we need to have a plan B. Like these models and all of these energy plans and stuff, which basically predict the energy system decades into the future. They're all good on paper, but if they don't eventuate, there's going to be huge consequences, not only for our energy, but also our climate security. So we really do need a plan B, and I think that's a pretty good reason for legalizing nuclear energy. I've got a question.
I have a good example from Finland where these expectations failed. We were building a really big geothermal project. We were drilling this really deep hole in Espoo, And a lot of the environmental movement people in traditional organizations say that, oh, we don't need any small modular reactors now or new nuclear because we'll, solve district heating with this geothermal. Well, that project failed. It has been stopped now. It didn't work. So now we are back to the drawing board. Like, okay, we should have, started planning this. Well, luckily we did because we were giving the pressure. So there was already stuff going on with the SMRs. But if we had done like the other environmentalists were saying, like, let's just stop thinking about nuclear and rely on this geothermal project that we can then finish that and then do other ones right after that, then we would be in trouble. So that's why it's always a good idea to have different options on the table.
We've got a comment, and it's in Australia, in, I guess, some parts of the media, there's been a bit of a conversation around the land footprint of renewables and a bit of concern, especially with people who own property and large amounts of land, but also those concerned about, land clearing and the preservation of forests and natural biodiversity. What would you say in regards to, I guess, the secondary environmental benefits of nuclear energy, especially in regards to its land footprint?
Yeah, I mean, land footprint is the smallest. So keeping nuclear in the mix will reduce the pressure on land use, and also it will reduce the need for mining activities because it requires the least amount of mining. So if you're worried about mining and its consequences, then you should be supporting nuclear. So yeah, it's definitely a discussion that we need to have, and we need to decide where we want to have these renewables, because in Finland there's already discussion about big solar plants because they're planning to put them on a field that could be, we could put forest in. We have a lot of forest in Finland, but it's kind of industrial forest, so we're losing biodiversity in old forests. So we should spare more land for like old growth forests in Finland. And so why would we be putting like these huge solar plants on a field? That because that's also land use. We should be putting them on rooftops on somewhere where it doesn't actually take space. And in the same way, like cutting down rainforests to put up windmills doesn't make any sense. So we need to be very strategical where we're putting these, because they use more land than nuclear. So then we must be smart about it. But if we have the nuclear in the mix, that will reduce the pressure of like for using land, and so that will help. So that's again one argument for having nuclear in this energy mix.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, look, renewables should play a role in Australia's future energy mix, but nuclear should equally have a role in complementing them and enhancing their capability. We've got another point around the nuclear submarines rotating around Australia without incident. What's your general thoughts on AUKUS, and I guess the irony that Australia is willing to maintain a ban on nuclear energy, but equally willing to, I guess, drive around floating small modular reactors around our major capital cities?
Yeah, that is funny. It's also funny that in Finland we had like a news story about a submarine like that. It's like we have nuclear plants in the country, so why should be worried about a submarine visiting our coastline? Yeah, it's always better that anything works with nuclear rather than fossil fuels. So of course, it's an improvement from an environmental perspective if you switch your submarines to nuclear operating ones, then rather than using fossil fuels as their energy source. But yeah. Also in Finland, what has helped a lot with the SMR discussion is that we have this small research reactor right in our capital city area, in the middle of it, like on a campus of a university, and nobody really knew or cared that it's there. So every time we have this, what if we had district heating reactors within the city limits? It's like, well, we've already had a small reactor in a capital city area. Nothing happened. But Finnish people are very accepting. So we had a poll about having the small nuclear plants within the city limits. And I think most politicians in every party said that it will be fine to have it in their own hometown. So the attitudes are really positive towards that as well.
That's interesting, because I don't think many Australians know that they've got a nuclear reactor only 40 kilometres from the Sydney CBD, the one at Lucas Heights, the ANSTO research reactor, the Opal one, which is interesting. And people are fine with that, but not other forms of reactors. I'll briefly just also make 2 comments. Please keep on sending in your questions for the last 7 minutes. Well, Taya will be answering your questions. But also apologies to everyone if you've had to move over from Instagram. I'm not sure what the reason is for why we couldn't live stream to Instagram this time again, but we will try and resolve it in the future. Now, I've got a question from Wade. Where does Finland source the uranium for the reactors?
So we have 2 companies operating nuclear plants in Finland. One is TVO that has the Olkiluoto plants 1, 2, and 3. Then we have Loviisa plants, which are operated by Fortum. So I think Olkiluoto, not sure like where they're getting their fuel from, but I know that it's not from Russia, because we had this very big discussion about, of course, when the war started. The Loviisa plants have been receiving fuel from Russia, but they're changing the supplier. So our goal is to have no nuclear fuel from Russia to our nuclear plants. So we did solve that issue. But I mean, there was a expert on the news just a few days ago, and she said that we're getting uranium from, for example, Canada and Australia. So it's really weird that you're supplying other countries, but not your own country. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, and in my own state of Queensland, which you visited, of course, a few weeks back, it's banned. Even though Australia has the largest uranium reserves in the world. But fortunately, the South Australian Premier, I think, is on board with nuclear energy, Peter Malinauskas. Second question from Wade again. Where is the nuclear waste stored? Is it in Finland, or is it exported elsewhere? You might also be able to comment on the waste repository, the underground one that Finland has got, which is quite unique.
So we store all of our own waste, and we are the first country in the world to build the final repository, which is located at the Olkiluoto Island. So that's the first one to be finished in the world. And so we have really solved the waste problem here in Finland. And we're actually starting the discussion in Finland that we could be importing nuclear waste from other countries, because that will be a huge business for us. A lot of countries don't have any solutions because it's a political problem. It's not really a scientific problem, but it's a political problem. So we could take advantage of this, because we have agreed what we're going to do with it, and just import waste from other countries. So that would be great. That's what I'm rooting for here in Finland now. That's our latest discussion topic on nuclear. Let's bring the waste here. We're happy to have it.
Well, look, if we can't manage a way to store our high-level waste from our AUKUS submarines, or even if we ever do develop a civil nuclear capability, if it's that big of an issue in Australia, how it's stored, and we all know it's safe, the spent fuel storage, at least we've got the option of exporting it and shipping it to Finland. Should make it.
And I mean, if we want to have even, nuclear power produces already so little waste, and it's very easy to store it in a safe manner. Actually, I don't believe that we even need a final repository. For me, it's just kind of a waste of money. But I mean, we could use breeder reactors to recycle this waste. So in Finland, we're not gonna close this final repository right now, because if in the future we have breeder reactors, then we can just kind of take them back up and use it as a energy source. So to me, the waste is really a non-issue. is the best managed waste in the world, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. If we don't have any questions, we've got 3 minutes left for questions. So if you have a question for Taya specifically, please send it in immediately. You'll also have the opportunity in the last 10 minutes to ask me questions. I'll put that mini agenda up. So we've got about 2 more minutes or so for questions. And thanks, Taya, for joining me. If there are no more questions, oh, sorry, we do have a question. In your experience, what discussion points are more effective in changing hearts and minds on nuclear power? Is it economics or environmental issues?
Economics and energy security. So even though I'm an environmentalist, I know that the environmental arguments only work for a really small and dedicated audience. For example, in Finland, we had this problem that women were not supporting nuclear as much as men. So we had this gender gap. But now when the war started, the support of women has just exploded. So I think it's because women realized that, I mean, for them, energy security is also very important. So when the war started, they realized that it's very good to have domestic energy production within the borders of Finland. So after the war started, the support in women has increased very much in Finland. And it's the same with, for example, in electric cars in Finland. I own one. I've owned one for 3 years now, and I bought it for environmental reasons. But when are polls in Facebook groups that has electric car owners in them, it's not the environmental reasons that people buy them in Finland. It's because it's really cheap. So in Finland, because the electricity prices are so low, it makes sense economically to buy an electric car. And this is why we have a lot more electric cars than you have in Australia. So I do believe that the economic arguments are much stronger.
We've got 2 really quick final questions I'm going to get through with you. First of all, as follow-up from that question, does people's prioritization of the issues, either environment or economics, change with each generation, if it's an older or younger generation?
Yeah, it seems that for younger generation, I mean, like climate reasons might be more convincing. Whereas when you have family and kids, economic reasons become more important. So yeah, I definitely think there's some.
Then for Mohammed, operating an actual nuclear plant is debatable, but why not at least have nuclear research? So Australia does have nuclear research. I think that probably addresses that question. And just we'll finally go to a last question. How do you see Quad framework to promote nuclear power generation? I'm personally not sure what's meant by Quad framework.
I'm just Googling it because I don't know either.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a strategic security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan, and the United States.
The Quad partnership, the alliance, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Japan is now, because they're planning to go back to nuclear even after Fukushima. And I know they're very active on the international front, because I was just attending a seminar in Poland last year, because Poland and Japan are actually working together on nuclear, because Poland is planning to start a nuclear program of their own. So I know they're very active. So I think, yeah, in that sense, and United States has also announced that they're going to invest in new nuclear now. So yeah, I think, and India as well. So yeah, I think that will give some pressure to Australia to start their own program as well.
Yeah. Well, that's all the questions we'll be asking you. Well, this morning your time, this evening our time. But thank you for answering them so thoughtfully and so thoroughly. I'm sure everyone, well, as they have expressed in the comments, have appreciated you coming on this evening to explain everything to us here. And it was great that you were able to visit Brisbane a few weeks ago, because I know that made a huge difference here in Australia. So thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what we're now going to go on to is, recently I had some positive news around appearing in front of the Australian Senate Committee. So I just need to get up something very quickly. Let me get this up. So I'll be appearing on the 15th of May in the Australian Environment and Communications Committee on the nuclear energy prohibition. So I'll be making an initial statement live from Canberra, and then be answering questions from the 6 senators you can see below. The 6 senators you can now see on my screen, and they'll be asking me why I support nuclear energy and why I believe that nuclear energy should be legalized in this country. So that's pretty much what will be happening. I'll have some more news to share in the future about what I'll be doing during my time in Canberra, and hopefully Sydney as well. I'm more than happy to meet up with people. But if you had any questions about it, I'll be staying online for next 10 minutes to answer any questions you have about what I'll probably be talking about. If you have any ideas for what you want me to talk about, please add them in the comments, because obviously this is quite a large opportunity. Now, before I get on to those, I'd like to make this clear that, as you can see at the top, we've got a goal, because the best evidence I can provide to the Senate is that Australians support nuclear energy. That's something that came up in the prerequisites for nuclear energy report done by the House in 2019. So that's why I've now got this goal. I know this is very optimistic, but with your help, I would really appreciate if we could get up to 10,000 signatures on our petition to legalise nuclear energy in this country. Currently, we're at about 2,400, so about a quarter of the way there, 25% of the way there. But if you can, please sign the petition, share it to your social medias, any way you can to help promote it, because that will greatly help. Because if I can share that evidence with the Senate, that will make a huge, huge difference. Because the reason they've got me, it's not just tokenistic, I hope, is to prove that Australians support nuclear energy, and that's coming from the position of me as a grassroots nuclear advocate. So if you could please sign and share the petition, the QR codes on your screen now remain up for the next little bit. The hyperlink is change.org/nuclear for Australia. And you can also, of course, there is the QR code. So I'd really appreciate if you could sign and share that. It looks like this when you're on the screen. So how can you help? First of all, you can share our petition with your friends and family. Second, you can post our petition to all of your social media pages, or you could repost one of our pieces of content, which we post quite regularly. Third option, mention our petition when you're in public or when you're in conversation with people. We need there to be support of it in the community, because look, I know that it's not that there are more than 2,416 or whatever people in Australia that support nuclear energy. And the number, and whilst the number of petition signatories will never be indicative of the number of Australians who support it, more numbers is always going to be beneficial, especially that number of 10,000. So if we could reach that goal, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll keep on explaining what's happening, but if you do have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, please add them in the comments, and I will endeavour to get to them in due course. But once again, thank you everyone for joining. But yeah, if you do have any questions about it, it's on May the 15th. I'll be in Canberra. Do get in touch if you want to meet me, if you want to have an in-person discussion. I'd be more than happy to. So that's what I'll say. Please, if you have questions, do send them to me. Oh, I just need to turn that off. So yeah, I'll just wait for some questions. If not, I'll just keep on explaining. You know what, I'll type something in for questions. So I do want to answer your questions. I'm sure there are a few questions about it. What I'll say is the reason I've been invited is because I made a submission to the Senate committee earlier this year. You can read that. That's on Parliament's website. And that is up publicly. It's submission 15. You can read what I had to say. That is ultimately how I've now progressed to this stage where I've been invited by the Senate committee to provide testimony to them. Yeah, I just saw that comment Mr. Bosley did on Facebook. Obviously, there are with the Australian Conservation Foundation, they'll be interesting because they'll be speaking right after me with Friends of the Earth Australia, and they've obviously got a bit more capital to fund their anti-nuclear advocacy. But in terms of direct fundraising, that's probably something I may do in the future, but that's to be confirmed. At this stage, it's completely grassroots, and I'm not receiving the millions of dollars in donations that those groups are receiving. So thanks for that comment. If anyone does have any more comments or questions, please do send them through. I've got 5 more minutes. Let's give it 2 more minutes, and then I'll quickly conclude this. But once again, thank you to everyone for joining, and I'll play this video again so it's made clear that our goal is, please, if you can, sign the petition. Like I said before, I'll be appearing in front of the Senate committee. That'll be me in one of those witness chairs on May the 15th. You can see there'll be Sarah Hanson-Young, Katie Grogan, Senator Sheldon, Senator Payman, Senator Hughes, and Senator Cadell, who will be asking me questions on the day. So it'll be a very exciting opportunity. I might take this opportunity now to say goodbye to you all and to say thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Reminder, please share our petition so we can reach our goal of 10,000 signatures. But it's been fantastic to join you all today. It's a pleasure to have you. Watch this, and thank you once again to Taya for your help with this and for answering everyone's questions so thoughtfully. With that, I will now wrap up, but thank you for joining us.